Economics in the Southern states. The first and most important point is that the Civil War was expensive. In 1860, the U.S. national debt was $65 million. 4 years of Civil War changed all that forever. In 1865, the national debt stood at $2.7 billion. Just the annual interest on that debt was more than twice our entire national budget in 1860. In fact, that Civil War debt is almost twice what the federal government spent before 1860. The first bullet point is, you plant, how are you going to pay for it? The question used is, how are they going to fund the war? In 1860, the South was still predominantly agricultural and highly dependent on the sale of staples to a world market. By 1815, cotton was the most valuable export in the United States. The South did experiment with using slave labor in manufacturing, but for the most part, it was well satisfied with its agricultural economy. On the eve of the Civil War, cotton prices were at an all-time high. The Confederate leaders were confident that the importance of cotton on the world market, particularly in England and France, would provide the South with diplomatic and military assistance they needed for victory. The South had a smaller industrial base, fewer rail lines, and an agricultural economy based upon slave labor. The Southern economy, while shaky through the war, grew even worse in its later years. The Emancipation Proclamation threatened the very existence of its primary labor source. The economy continued to suffer during 1864 as Union armies battered Confederate troops in the eastern and western theaters. Efforts to raise war revenue through various methods of taxation did not work. The Confederate Congress enacted a minor tariff in 1861, but it only contributed $3.5 million in 4 years. The South tried to fund the war by levying excise taxes, selling bonds to their people, and issuing tremendous amount of paper money without special banking. The second bullet is, your land is war zone. The question used is, most of the battles were fought in the South. What's the outcome? Since most of the battles were fought in the South, the aftermath of the war was expensive. Reconstruction governments brought the bureaucrats to the South to spend money on reunion. Since most of the battles were fought in the South, the land would get destroyed, which resulted in the lack of crop produce. This is a downfall for the Southern economy because agriculture was their primary source of income. Due to the war, Confederate land was devastated, their railroads were demolished, and their cities were destroyed. The third bullet is, can we borrow, please? The question is, what did they use for tax bond and borrow? They turned to loans to finance the initial bulk of the war debts. The Treasury earned $15 million selling out their first bond issue. The second issue, however, consisting of $100 million in 8% yield bonds, sold slowly. Another issue, European bankers refused to issue loans due to the lack of confidence in the South's ability to repay the loans. The fourth bullet, yes, we tax each other. The question is how they tax themselves. The revenue from taxes on international trade became smaller and smaller. A war tax was enacted but provided difficult to collect. The comparison of direct taxes in total revenue for the North was about 20%, while in comparison for the South, the same share was only 8%. A major part of the reason why tax revenue did not play as large a role for the Confederacy was the individual states' opposition to a strong central government and the belief in states' rights, which precluded giving too much taxing power to the government. Another factor for not extending the tax system was the belief that the war was not going to last a long time. The Confederates did, however, pass tax in kind, which was directly tied to providing the Confederate Army.